Elara's bookstore, the Cosmic Page, was more than just a shop. It was a sanctuary. The scent of old paper, brewing chamomile tea, and faint lavender from the sachets, tucked between ancient tomes, mingled in the air. Dust motes danced in the shafts of late-afternoon sunlight that pierced the tall, arched windows, illuminating shelves stacked high with stories of far-off galaxies, mythical creatures, and forgotten histories. Elara herself was a creature of quiet habits, much like the gentle hum of her shop. Her fingers, often smudged with ink or the faint silver sheen of metallic bookmarks, moved with a dancer's grace as she rearranged a display of newly arrived celestial atlases. Her dark curls, usually escaping their loose braid, framed a face often lost in thought, eyes the color of deep periwinkle, always seeming to hold a distant star within their depths. She lived in the small apartment above the shop, a space that was an extension of her soul. Bookshelves overflowing, a worn velvet armchair by the window, and most cherished of all, a modest but powerful refractor telescope perched on a sturdy tripod. Many a night, after the last customer had left and the shop door was locked, Elara would ascend the creaking stairs, brew another cup of tea, and turn her gaze upwards, losing herself in the silent majesty of the cosmos. The stars were her oldest friends, their stories whispered on the silent currents of the night air, often inspiring the gentle narrative she'd scribble in a leather-bound journal. Her days were a rhythm of turning pages, recommending tales of wonder, and the quiet satisfaction of connecting a reader with their next adventure. She loved the murmur of conversation in her shop, the rustle of turning pages, the soft chime of the bell above the door. It was a perfectly contented life, she often thought, a universe of her own making, filled with stories and starlight. Yet, sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night, when a particularly bright meteor streaked across the sky, she felt a tiny, almost imperceptible ache, a whisper for a shared wonder, a hand to hold as she pointed out the constellations. It was on one such ordinary Tuesday, a day as gentle and predictable as the turning of the earth, that the chime above the door announced something decidedly out of the ordinary. A man stepped inside, and the sudden shift in the shop's quiet equilibrium was palpable. He wasn't loud or boisterous. In fact, his entrance was almost as soft as the settling dust. But there was an undeniable presence about him, a quiet magnetism that drew Elara's gaze from the delicate task of dusting an antique globe. He was tall, with broad shoulders encased in a well-worn tweed jacket that spoke of travel and comfort. His hair was the color of rich earth, slightly tousled, as if he'd just run his fingers through it, and his eyes, when they met hers, were an astonishing shade of hazel, flecked with gold, holding a depth that seemed to reflect the very stories on her shelves. A faint, almost imperceptible scar traced the line of his left eyebrow, adding a touch of rugged charm to an otherwise gentle face. He carried a leather satchel slung over one shoulder, its worn edges testament to many journeys. He paused just inside the doorway, taking a moment to absorb the atmosphere of the shop. His gaze swept over the towering shelves, the cozy nooks, the celestial maps adorning the walls, and the small hand-painted sign above the counter that read, "Enter here, traveler, and find your universe." A slow, warm smile touched his lips, a smile that seemed to reach his eyes and crinkle the corners. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone, like the comforting rumble of distant thunder on a summer's day. "This place, it's quite remarkable." Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, a rare occurrence. She was used to compliments about her shop, but not delivered with such quiet intensity, or by someone who seemed to have stepped out of one of her own adventure novels. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a little softer than usual. "Welcome to the Cosmic Page." He walked further in, his steps unhurried, his eyes still exploring. He ran a hand lightly over the spine of a book on astronomy, then paused before a display of antique star charts. "I'm looking for something specific," he began, turning back to her. "Or perhaps, something I don't even know I'm looking for yet." He chuckled softly, a sound that made a small, unfamiliar flutter begin in Elara's chest. "Do you have anything on the lost constellations? The ones only whispered about in ancient texts? Perhaps ones that have faded from our sky, or were never truly there?" Elara felt a thrill of surprise. Most customers asked for the latest bestseller or a popular genre. This man was different. "Lost constellations," she repeated, intrigued. "You mean like Argo Navis, perhaps, or Musca Borealis?" Esoteric? Yes, he confirmed, his eyes lighting up. I'm fascinated by the stories people tell about the sky, the way they tried to map the unknown, even if their maps were more poetry than science. He gestured vaguely. I've been traveling, seeking out these stories, these whispers, in different cultures. I'm a writer, you see. Liam Donovan. He extended a hand across the counter. Alara took it, her fingers brushing his. His grip was firm but gentle, and a surprising warmth bloomed where their skin touched. Alara, she introduced herself, her cheeks still warm. Alara Vance, a writer of whispers, you say? That's a beautiful way to put it. And you, Alara Vance, Liam replied, his gaze lingering on her. You seem to be a keeper of whispers, I can tell. This shop, it has that feel. He released her hand, and Alara felt a subtle disappointment, quickly stifled. I try, she said, managing a small smile. I do have a section dedicated to celestial mythology and ancient astronomy, and a few rare texts. Have you ever heard of the Star Weaver's lore? It's a collection of legends from a nomadic desert tribe, claiming the stars are threads woven by cosmic beings. Liam's eyes widened. The Star Weaver's lore? I've only ever seen references to it in academic journals, never an actual copy. I thought it was apocryphal. It's a first edition, Alara confessed, a touch of pride in her voice. It was passed down to me from my grandmother. It's not for sale, but I keep it here, for inspiration. She pointed to a glass display case near a comfortable reading chair. It's right there, next to the Roman treatise on planetary omens. Liam walked over to the case, his movements fluid and unhurried. He knelt down, peering at the leather-bound book with an almost reverent air. Incredible, he murmured, more to himself than to her. He traced the faint gold lettering on the spine through the glass. To hold such history, it's a privilege. He spent a long time by the display, occasionally glancing up at the celestial maps on the walls, and once, his eyes seemed to drift upwards, towards the bay window of her apartment above, where the subtle curve of her telescope's lens might just be visible if one knew where to look. Alara wondered if he had noticed. Eventually he rose, turning back to her with a thoughtful expression. Thank you for showing me this, Alara. Even just seeing it is a gift. He paused, then added, Do you, by any chance, ever read from these ancient texts or share their stories? Alara blinked, surprised by the question. Sometimes, she admitted. To myself, mostly. Or to my cat, Luna, who is an excellent, if somewhat judgmental, listener. A small laugh escaped her. Why do you ask? Because, Liam said, stepping back towards the counter, his gaze warm and direct. I think I could listen to you read for hours, and Luna sounds like a discerning critic. He leaned a little closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But perhaps, a human listener might offer a different perspective. Her heart did that little flutter again, stronger this time. It was an invitation, she realized, gentle and unspoken, woven into the fabric of his words. I suppose I could, she said, feeling her cheeks warm again. If you found yourself with some time to spare, that is. I have nothing but time, Alara, he replied, his hazel eyes twinkling. I'm here for a while, seeking inspiration, as I said. He paused, then added, and perhaps finding a few lost constellations of my own. He didn't buy a book that day, not in the traditional sense, but he left with something far more valuable. A promise of a return, a shared secret about ancient lore, and a quiet current of anticipation that hummed in the air long after the bell above the door had chimed his departure. Alara spent the rest of the afternoon in a pleasant haze. She found herself humming a tune she hadn't thought of in years, her movements a little lighter, her smile a little wider. Luna, her sleek black cat, observed her from her perch on a stack of poetry books, tail twitching, as if sensing the subtle shift in her human's universe. That night, as Alara ascended the stairs to her apartment, the Star Weaver's lore tucked carefully under her arm, she found herself not rushing to her telescope. Instead, she settled into her armchair, the ancient book open on her lap, and reread the introductory passages, Liam's voice echoing in her memory. She found herself wondering about him, where he'd traveled, what stories he'd collected, what had brought him to her quiet corner of the world. The thought was as comforting as the warm tea steaming beside her, and as exciting as the distant glimmer of a newly discovered nebula. The next day, Alara kept an unconscious eye on the door. She told herself it was purely out of professional courtesy, a curiosity about a unique customer. But, deep down, she knew it was more. The shop seemed to hold its breath with her, waiting. Liam returned late that afternoon, just as the sun began to dip below the rooftops, casting long shadows across the cobblestone street outside. The bell chimed, and Alara looked up from cataloging a new shipment of graphic novels, her heart giving a little skip. "Afternoon, Alara," he greeted, his smile just as warm as the day before. He was holding a small, intricately carved wooden bird, which he placed gently on the counter. "I found this at a small antique shop down the street. It reminded me of a story I once heard about birds carrying starlight in their wings." Alara reached out, her fingers tracing the smooth wood. "It's beautiful, Liam. Thank you. It feels magical." "Everything feels a little magical in here," he said, his gaze sweeping around the shop, then settling on her. "Did you have a chance to reread the Star Weaver's lore?" "I did," she confessed. "The passage about the celestial serpent caught my eye, how it's said to swallow the moon on nights of eclipse, only to birth it anew, brighter than before." Liam leaned against the counter, his posture relaxed, inviting. "I know that legend. In some cultures, they beat drums and shout at the serpent during an eclipse to scare it into releasing the moon. And in others," Alara added, "they believe the serpent is a benevolent guardian, guiding the moon through a cosmic rebirth." "Which do you prefer?" he asked, his eyes intent on hers. "The latter, I think," she admitted. "I like to imagine the universe as more benevolent than cruel." "Me too," Liam murmured, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Tell me, Alara, what else do you believe about the stars?" And so they talked. The afternoon bled into evening, the golden light of the setting sun giving way to the soft glow of the shop's lamps. They discussed constellations, ancient beliefs, the scientific marvels of distant galaxies, and the poetic beauty of naming stars after heroes and myths. Alara found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't to anyone else, sharing her quiet wonder, her theories, her dreams of discovering a new comet, or simply witnessing a particularly spectacular meteor shower. Liam listened with an attentiveness that was both flattering and deeply comforting. He didn't interrupt, but rather offered gentle prompts, thoughtful questions, and sometimes a shared smile that made her feel utterly seen. He spoke of his travels, of watching the aurora borealis dance over frozen landscapes, of navigating by the Southern Cross in the deserts of Namibia, of the way different cultures projected their hopes and fears onto the vast canvas of the night sky. "It sounds like you've seen the world, Liam," Alara said, a touch of wistfulness in her voice. "I've mostly seen it through books and my telescope." "And there's a beauty in that too, Alara," he replied, his voice soft. "To find entire universes within these pages, to touch the sky from your own window. It's a different kind of journey, but no less profound." He paused, then looked at her, a hint of something new in his eyes, a quiet invitation. "Have you ever considered taking your telescope out of the window, to a darker spot perhaps, where the city lights don't quite reach?" Alara's breath hitched. She had many times. There was a small, secluded hill just outside town, known for its breathtaking panoramic views of the valley, and more importantly, its incredibly dark skies. She'd often dreamed of setting up her telescope there, under a truly pristine canopy of stars. But she'd never had the courage, or the inclination, to go alone. "I have," she whispered, meeting his gaze. "There's a place, Blackwood Hill. The skies there are incredible." "I know it," Liam said, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "I scouted it out when I first arrived, looking for quiet places. I often go there to write, or just to watch the sky." He paused, his hazel eyes holding hers. "Perhaps, one night, we could watch them together. You with your telescope, and me with my stories." The proposal was so simple, so natural, yet it felt like the most extraordinary invitation she had ever received. To share her most private passion, her silent wonder, with someone who seemed to understand it implicitly. The thought sent a delicious shiver down her spine. I would like that very much, Liam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very much indeed." Liam's smile widened, a genuine heart-melting curve of his lips. "Good," he said, a quiet satisfaction in his tone. "Then it's settled. When the moon is new and the stars are at their brightest. How about next Friday evening? If the weather holds. Next Friday, Alara confirmed, her heart already feeling lighter, filled with a new kind of starlight. I'll pack the warmest tea. He stayed a little longer, just talking, sharing comfortable silences as the light faded completely outside and the street lamps flickered on. When he finally stood to leave, the shop was truly dark, save for the soft glow of the reading lamps. Until Friday, Alara, he said, his voice a warm murmur in the quiet shop. Until Friday, Liam, she replied, her gaze lingering on him as he walked towards the door. This time, when the bell chimed, it didn't just announce a departure. It heralded a beginning. Alara stood by the counter for a long moment, the scent of old books and chamomile tea, mingling with a new, faint fragrance. Something fresh and outdoorsy, like pine and distant rain, that seemed to cling to Liam. She touched the spot on the counter where his hand had rested, a warmth still lingering there. She looked up at the bay window of her apartment, then out into the deepening twilight. The first stars were beginning to prick through the indigo canvas. Blackwood Hill. Next Friday. The thought was a constellation forming in her own personal sky, bright and full of promise. She couldn't wait. The quiet whispers of the universe suddenly felt a little less lonely, a little more like a shared secret, waiting to be explored together. The quiet whispers of the universe suddenly felt a little less lonely, a little more like a shared secret, waiting to be explored together. The following days unfurled slowly, each one a leaf, turning on a calendar she watched with an almost breathless anticipation. Alara found herself humming as she painted, her brushstrokes imbued with a new lightness. The colors on her canvas seemed to shimmer with an inner luminescence, reflecting the glow that had taken root deep within her. She caught herself smiling at strangers, lost in daydreams of celestial bodies, and a certain quiet, thoughtful man. Julian sent a text on Monday, simple and sweet. Morning, Alara. Hope your week is off to a bright start. Still looking forward to Friday. I'm dying. Alara's fingers hovered over her phone, a warmth spreading through her chest. Good morning, Julian. It certainly is, thank you. And yes, absolutely. More than you know. His reply came almost instantly. Do good. Wouldn't want you to think I was imagining that spark on Friday. When? A blush crept up her neck. I definitely not imagining it. Nee. Excellent, he wrote. Consider Friday officially marked on the constellations. Indeed. She laughed aloud, a light, melodious sound that echoed in her quiet apartment. He had a way with words, a subtle charm that resonated deeply with her own poetic leanings. The week continued with a comfortable rhythm of work and anticipation. Alara spent more time than usual choosing her outfit for Friday, settling on a deep sapphire dress that mirrored the twilight sky, soft and flowing, paired with boots that were both stylish and practical for a hill climb. She even practiced a few constellations on her laptop, wanting to be able to identify more than just the Big Dipper. It felt a little silly, but also endearing. A small act of preparation for a night she hoped would be truly special. By Friday afternoon, a delightful tremor ran through her. The scent of rain-washed earth drifted through her open window, mingling with the subtle aroma of lavender from her diffuser. She finished a particularly satisfying painting, a swirl of blues and purples, and then began to get ready. She braided a section of her dark hair, letting the rest fall in soft waves around her shoulders, and applied just a touch of shimmering eyeshadow, like distant starlight. She wanted to feel like herself, but a slightly more polished, hopeful version. A soft knock at her door, at precisely 7 o'clock, sent a flutter through her stomach. She took a deep breath, smoothing her dress, and opened it. Julian stood there, looking even more handsome than she remembered. He was wearing dark jeans, a cream cable-knit sweater that made him look approachable and warm, and a subtly patterned scarf loosely wrapped around his neck. His dark hair was a little windswept, and his eyes, the color of deep moss, held a gentle spark when they met hers. In his hand, he held a small, neatly wrapped bundle. Alara, he said, his voice a low rumble that instantly calmed her nerves. You look luminous. A blush bloomed on her cheeks. Julian, you look wonderful too. She gestured to the bundle. What's that? He offered it to her with a shy smile. Just a little something. I remembered you mentioning your love for Earl Grey, and a good book is always a good companion. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a beautiful tin of artisan Earl Grey tea and a first edition of a classic poetry collection she'd mentioned in passing. A genuine, surprised laugh escaped her. "Julian, this is incredibly thoughtful. Thank you." Her fingers traced the elegant typeface on the book's cover. "You remembered?" "Of course," he said, his gaze steady. "Details matter." He paused, then added, "And I figured a good book might be nice for a quiet evening, if you ever needed a break from the stars." "It's perfect," she assured him, carrying the gifts inside. "Let me just put these away." When she returned, he gestured towards the door. "Ready to chase some constellations?" "More than ready," she grinned, grabbing her small crossbody bag. His car was a dark, comfortable sedan, impeccably clean. The scent of faint leather and something fresh, like pine, filled the interior. As he started the engine, a soft instrumental jazz piece began to play, subtle and soothing. It was all so perfectly Yimhan. The drive out of the city was a gradual transition from the urban hum to the quiet whisper of the countryside. Alara found herself relaxing into the passenger seat, the gentle rhythm of the car and Julian's presence a comforting balm. They chatted easily, discussing their week, a new art exhibition Julian had heard about, and a particularly interesting article Alara had read on stellar nurseries. He was a good listener, asking insightful questions that encouraged her to elaborate, and sharing his own thoughts with a quiet enthusiasm. "Blackwood Hill is about another 20 minutes from here," he informed her, turning onto a narrower tree-lined road. "It's a bit of a climb once we park, but the view is worth it." "I don't doubt it," she said, looking out at the darkening landscape. The air grew cooler, crisper, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine forests. They pulled into a small secluded parking area at the base of the hill. Julian opened her door, then retrieved a large woven blanket and a thermos from his trunk. "Hot chocolate," he explained, holding up the thermos. "And some shortbread I baked this afternoon." Alara's eyes widened. "You baked? Is there anything I don't do?" He chuckled, a low, warm sound. "I find it relaxing, and I thought it might be a nice treat under the stars." He offered her a hand as they began to ascend the well-worn path. The climb was indeed a little steep, but manageable. The path wound through a cluster of tall, ancient trees, their branches silhouetted against the deepening twilight. Julian walked slightly ahead, his hand still gently clasping hers, pulling her up a particularly rocky section. The contact was light, comforting, and sent a pleasant shiver through her. As they emerged from the tree line, the world opened up. Blackwood Hill lived up to its reputation. The summit was a wide grassy expanse, gently sloping, and completely free of light pollution. Below them, the city lights twinkled in the distance like scattered jewels. But above, the sky was a breathtaking tapestry of deepening indigo, already studded with a multitude of stars. The air was cool and incredibly fresh, carrying the faint, sweet scent of wildflowers. "Oh, Julian," Alara breathed, stopping to take it all in. "It's magnificent." He squeezed her hand. "I thought you'd like it." He led her to a flat spot near the edge of the summit, where a lone, gnarled oak tree stood sentinel. Spreading the thick blanket carefully, he invited her to sit. They settled down, side by side, the blanket a soft barrier against the cool ground. Julian poured the steaming hot chocolate into 2 mugs he brought, the rich, sweet aroma mingling with the crisp night air. He handed her a mug, and then a piece of delicate shortbread. "Hope you like cinnamon," he said. Alara took a sip of the hot chocolate. It was rich, creamy, and perfectly sweet. "It's divine. And the shortbread, you really are full of surprises." She took a bite, the buttery sweetness melting on her tongue. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just watching the sky darken further, the stars blooming into sharper focus. The silence wasn't awkward, it was companionable, filled with the quiet awe of the moment. "Do you come up here often?" Alara asked, her voice a soft murmur. Julian nodded. "When I need to clear my head, or just to remember how small we are, and how vast everything else is, it puts things into perspective." He paused, then turned to her, his profile outlined against the faint starlight. "I like sharing it. It feels right." Alara's heart gave a little lurch. "It feels right." Those words resonated with a profound simplicity. "I understand that feeling," she replied, her gaze drifting back to the sky. When I paint, sometimes I feel like I'm trying to capture a tiny piece of something immense, something that connects us all. It's a way of sharing a glimpse of the universe, I suppose. I think you do that beautifully, he said, his voice quiet. Your paintings, they have a depth to them, a sense of wonder. They make you feel. She turned to him, meeting his gaze. Thank you. That means a lot. She felt a warmth spread through her, deeper than the hot chocolate. He always saw her, truly saw the core of her passion. Tell me about your early days as an artist, Julian prompted, leaning back slightly on his hands. What first drew you to it? Alara smiled, recalling her childhood. My grandmother. She was a painter, though she never sold anything. She just painted for the joy of it. Her attic studio was my favorite place in the world. The smell of turpentine and oil paints. The way light streamed through the dusty window. She taught me that art wasn't about perfection, but about feeling. About letting your soul speak through your hands. She paused, a nostalgic tenderness in her voice. I remember one time I was so frustrated with a watercolor I wanted to tear it up. She just gently took my hand, dipped my finger in some blue paint, and let me swirl it on the paper, making it into a storm cloud. She said, even storms have their own beauty, Alara. Don't be afraid of the chaos. That stuck with me. Julian listened intently, his gaze unwavering. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was, Alara agreed. And you? What led you to architecture, Julian? It seems so precise, so structured compared to the fluidity of art. He chuckled softly. It is, but there's an art to it too, I think. To creating spaces that people live in, breathe in, dream in. I've always been fascinated by how light falls into a room, how a building can feel both grand and intimate. My grandfather was a carpenter, and I spent my summers in his workshop, learning to love the smell of sawdust and the feel of wood grain. He taught me about foundations, about integrity, but building something to last. So, both our grandfathers shaped us in different ways, Alara mused, a sense of shared history blooming between them. One taught you to build a sturdy home, the other to paint the sky above it. Perhaps, Julian said, a thoughtful expression on his face. And now, here we are, looking at the sky together. He pointed upwards. See that bright one just above the horizon? That's Vega, part of the Lyra constellation. Alara followed his gaze. You know your constellations. A few, he admitted, a hint of modesty in his tone. My father was an amateur astronomer. He used to bring me up here or to other spots with his telescope. He taught me the basics. He paused, his voice softening. He passed away a few years ago. Coming up here, it feels like a way to still connect with him. Alara felt a pang of understanding, a quiet empathy. I'm so sorry, Julian. Losing someone like that is incredibly difficult. She reached out, her fingers gently touching his arm, a silent offering of comfort. He turned his head, his eyes meeting hers in the dim starlight. A flicker of vulnerability, quickly masked, passed through them. Thank you, Alara. It's been a while, but some things stay with you. He covered her hand with his, a warm, reassuring pressure. But tonight isn't about sorrow. It's about wonder. He shifted, leaning back against the blanket, and gestured for her to do the same. They lay side by side, looking up. The vast expanse of the cosmos spread above them. The air grew colder, but the blanket was warm, and the proximity to Julian, the gentle weight of his hand still resting over hers, chased away any chill. There is the Big Dipper, Alara pointed, and if you follow the handle, you get to Arcturus, right? Julian smiled. Exactly. And if you follow the two stars at the front of the Dipper, you can find Polaris, the North Star. He guided her finger with his own, their hands still intertwined. It's not the brightest star, but it's always there, always pointing true north. They found the faint, misty band of the Milky Way, a river of stars stretching across the dark canvas. Julian explained about nebulae, about the birth and death of stars, about the incredible distances involved. He spoke with a quiet passion, his voice a soothing murmur against the backdrop of the silent night. Alara found herself completely captivated, not just by the wonders of the universe, but by the thoughtful man beside her who brought those wonders to life. It's humbling, isn't it? Alara whispered, her voice full of awe. To think of all that's out there. And to think we're here on this tiny blue dot, sharing a moment under all of it, Julian added, his voice equally hushed. His thumb gently stroked the back of her hand. They lay like that for what felt like hours, simply existing in the shared space, the shared wonder. The hot chocolate mugs were empty, the shortbread crumbs brushed away. The stars seemed to grow brighter, closer, as if reaching down to them. Elara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a feeling of belonging she hadn't realized she was missing until now. She turned her head slightly, her gaze meeting Julian's. His eyes, reflecting the distant starlight, held an intensity that made her breath catch. The air between them thrummed with unspoken emotions, a silent language of connection. "Thank you for this, Julian," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's perfect." He shifted, turning fully towards her, his hand sliding from hers to gently cup her cheek. His thumb brushed softly over her skin, sending a jolt of pure warmth through her. "Elara," he murmured, his voice a low, tender whisper. "I feel like I've been waiting for a moment like this." His gaze dropped to her lips, and Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt herself leaning in, drawn by an invisible, irresistible force. The universe seemed to hold its breath, every star a silent witness to the magnetic pull between them. His head dipped closer, his breath warm against her face, carrying the faint scent of cinnamon and cool night air. Her eyes fluttered closed, anticipating, hoping. Then, a sudden, bright streak of light arced across the sky, a magnificent shooting star blazing a trail directly above them. Julian paused, his lips just inches from hers, and let out a soft, surprised chuckle. Well, that was certainly a timely intervention from the cosmos. Elara opened her eyes, a soft laugh escaping her as she watched the last vestiges of the meteor disappear. The spell was broken, but not in a disappointing way. Instead, it felt like the universe was teasing them, prolonging the delicious anticipation. Julian pulled back slightly, though his hand still rested warmly on her cheek, his thumb still caressing her skin. "Make a wish?" he asked, a playful glint in his eyes. Elara smiled, a genuine radiant smile. I think I already have everything I could wish for, right here." His gaze softened, a deep, knowing look passing between them. He didn't lean in again for a kiss. Instead, he gently pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, and rested his chin lightly on the top of her head. Elara nestled into his side, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. She closed her eyes, breathing in his scent, feeling utterly content. The stars continued their silent dance above them, and the quiet whispers of the universe felt not just shared, but held close, a precious secret unfolding with beautiful slowness. It was more than she could have ever wished for. Liam's arm was a warm anchor, and Elara felt herself sinking deeper into the quiet comfort of his presence. The vastness of the cosmos above them seemed to shrink, becoming a private canopy over their shared moment. She could feel the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing, a reassuring counterpoint to the soft chirping of crickets that had begun their nightly chorus. "Are you cold?" Liam's voice was a low murmur, rumbling gently against her ear as he spoke. Elara shook her head, a soft sigh escaping her lips. "No, just content." He tightened his arm almost imperceptibly, a gesture that spoke volumes. "Me you," he said, his voice laced with a quiet satisfaction that resonated deep within her. They remained like that for what felt like both an eternity and a fleeting second, suspended in the cool night air, bathed in moonlight and the soft glow of distant stars. The magic of the moment was potent, a fragile, exquisite thing Elara didn't want to disturb. But eventually, the chill began to truly set in, a gentle reminder of the world beyond their bubble of warmth. Liam stirred first, a reluctant shift. "As much as I'd like to stay out here until sunrise, I think the night is calling for an end." Elara lifted her head from his shoulder, a small, wistful smile playing on her lips. "It was beautiful, Liam. Thank you." He met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the starlight, a warmth in their depths that made her heart flutter. "My pleasure, Elara. Every moment." He stood up smoothly, then offered her a hand. Her fingers found his, and the simple touch sent a ripple of warmth through her. His grip was firm, grounding. He pulled her up effortlessly, and for a moment they stood close, bathed in the pale moonlight, their hands still clasped. The air between them hummed with unspoken words, with a tenderness that was almost palpable. Liam was the one to break the spell, gently disentangling their hands, though his thumb brushed softly over her knuckles before he let go completely. "Shall we head inside?" Alara nodded, her voice a little breathy. "Yes." They walked back towards the cottage, the gravel crunching softly under their feet, the silence now filled with a comfortable ease rather than a charged anticipation. The light from the porch lamp cast a welcoming glow, chasing away the deepest shadows. Inside, the cottage felt even cozier, the lingering scent of wood smoke and the subtle warmth from the hearth, a comforting embrace. "I should probably turn in," Alara said, trying to sound casual, but her heart was still thrumming from the evening. Liam turned to her, his hands tucked into his pockets. "It's been a wonderful night, Alara." "It truly has," she agreed, meeting his gaze. There was so much she wanted to say, so much she felt, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. The depth of connection she'd felt under the stars was still overwhelming, a precious discovery. He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Sleep well." "You too, Liam." She hesitated for a moment, then, driven by an impulse she couldn't resist, she took a small step closer, reaching out to gently touch his arm. "Thank you again, for everything." His eyes softened further, and he covered her hand with his own for just a second, a light, reassuring squeeze. "Always." Then, with a gentle nod, he turned and headed towards the back of the cottage, presumably to his own room. Alara watched him go, a wistful warmth spreading through her chest. She lingered for a moment in the living room, replaying the evening, the starlight, the quiet shared breaths, the feeling of his arm around her. It was a memory she knew she would cherish. Finally, with a soft sigh of contentment, she made her way to her own bedroom. The small room felt even more inviting now, a sanctuary after the emotional richness of the evening. She changed into her softest pajamas, her mind still replaying the warmth of Liam's hand, the quiet strength in his voice. As she slipped under the covers, the cool sheets a welcome contrast to the warmth she carried inside, she found herself smiling into the darkness. Sleep came easily, a gentle descent into dreams filled with shimmering constellations, and the comforting presence of a kind man. The morning sunlight, filtered through the rustling leaves outside her window, painted dappled patterns across Alara's quilt. She stretched languidly, a deep sense of peace settling over her. The anxieties that often pricked at her upon waking felt distant, replaced by a quiet eagerness for the day ahead. She could hear the faint sounds of movement from the kitchen, the gentle clinking of a mug, the soft hum of the kettle. Liam was already awake. A flutter of nerves mixed with excitement stirred in her stomach. How would they be this morning? Would the magic of the previous night still linger, or would the light of day bring a return to a more cautious familiarity? She quickly dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft knitted sweater, tying her hair back in a loose ponytail. Stepping into the living room, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and something deliciously sweet filled the air. Liam was by the stove, flipping what looked like golden brown pancakes. He turned as she entered, a warm smile instantly lighting his face. "Good morning, Alara. Sleep well?" "Morning, Liam. Like a log, thank you," she replied, her voice soft. "And you?" "Very well. The fresh air always helps." He gestured to the table, which was already set with 2 mugs, plates, and a small jug of maple syrup. "Coffee's ready. I hope you like pancakes." "I love pancakes," Alara exclaimed, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "This smells amazing." "Just a simple recipe," he said, though his eyes held a pleased glint. He transferred a stack of fluffy pancakes to a plate and placed it in front of her. "Help yourself." They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments, savoring the warmth of the coffee and the sweetness of the pancakes. The morning light streamed in through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and casting a gentle glow on Liam's profile. He seemed perfectly at home here, his movements unhurried and graceful. "So," Alara began, breaking the quiet, "what's on the agenda for today?" Liam took a sip of his coffee. "Well, I thought we could take a walk down to the river if you'd like. There's a quiet spot I know, perfect for sketching if you're inclined. And then perhaps later I have a few small repairs I was planning to do on the garden shed." "That sounds lovely," Alara said, her eyes brightening. A walk by the river would be perfect, and I'd love to sketch. The thought of spending another day in his company, in this peaceful setting, filled her with a quiet joy. After breakfast, Liam insisted on doing the dishes, waving away Alara's offers to help. You're the guest, Alara. Besides, I enjoy the quiet rhythm of it. While he cleared the table, Alara retrieved her sketchbook and a small tin of pencils. She watched him for a moment, the easy way he moved, the strong lines of his back. There was a groundedness about him, a quiet strength that she found incredibly appealing. Soon they were ready, stepping out into the crisp morning air. The sun was higher now, warming their faces as they walked down a narrow, winding path that led away from the cottage and into a stand of ancient oak trees. The air was filled with the earthy scent of damp soil and fallen leaves, mingled with the fresh, clean smell of pine. Liam walked a little ahead, clearing stray branches from the path, his presence a comforting shield. He pointed out different types of trees, identified bird calls, and shared small anecdotes about the history of the land. Alara listened, captivated, not just by his words, but by the quiet passion in his voice when he spoke of nature. This way, he said, veering off the main path and down a steeper incline. Within moments, they emerged into a small, secluded clearing. A narrow, sparkling river wound its way through the landscape, its surface dappled with sunlight. On the far bank, a cluster of willow trees dipped their delicate branches into the water, creating a serene, almost magical scene. "Oh, Liam, it's beautiful," Alara breathed, stopping to take it all in. The air here was cooler, carrying the fresh scent of the river. The gentle gurgle of the water was the only sound, a soothing melody. "I thought you might like it," he said, a pleased smile on his face. He led her to a smooth, flat rock by the water's edge. "This is my favorite spot, perfect for thinking or just being." Alara settled onto the rock, pulling out her sketchbook. The scene before her was an artist's dream. The play of light on the water, the texture of the willow branches, the reflections in the calm surface. She began to sketch, her pencil moving with a renewed freedom, inspired by the tranquility of the place and the quiet company beside her. Liam sat a little distance away, leaning against a tree trunk, his gaze on the river. He didn't speak, didn't intrude, simply existing in the space with her, a silent, comforting presence. It allowed Alara to fully immerse herself in her art, to let her thoughts wander freely. As she sketched, she found herself capturing not just the visual beauty, but the profound sense of peace she felt. She even found herself sketching Liam, his profile against the backdrop of the trees, his gaze distant but content. It was a private, unspoken moment of observation. After a while, she looked up, feeling a sense of completion with her initial sketches. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said, her voice soft. "It's truly special." Liam turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. "It is. Sometimes I just come here to listen." "To what?" she asked, intrigued. "To the river, the wind, the quiet hum of the world. It reminds me to slow down, to appreciate the simple things." He paused, then his gaze became more direct. "It reminds me a lot of what I imagine you find in your art, Alara. A way to connect with something deeper." Alara felt a flush spread across her cheeks. He saw her, truly saw her, in a way few people ever had. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "It is. It's my way of making sense of things, of finding beauty in the everyday." He nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I understand that. My woodworking, in a way, is similar. Taking something raw and shaping it, finding the grain, bringing out its inherent beauty. It's a slow process, but deeply rewarding." They talked then, about their creative processes, about the satisfaction of working with their hands, about the quiet joy of creation. Alara found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't anticipated, sharing her dreams for her art, her fears of not being good enough, of never truly making a mark. Liam listened patiently, his gaze unwavering. When she finished, he simply said, "Your art is beautiful, Alara. I saw your sketchbook last night." "Just a glimpse, but enough. There's a vulnerability and a strength in your lines that is truly captivating. Don't ever doubt that." His words were a balm to her soul, a gentle reassurance that settled some of the long-held anxieties she carried. "Thank you, Liam," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot." He simply smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. The sun was high in the sky by the time they walked back to the cottage, their conversation still flowing easily, seamlessly transitioning from art to life, to shared memories and dreams. The walk back felt lighter, buoyed by the deeper connection they had forged. Lunch was simple: fresh bread, cheese, and tomatoes from the small garden Liam tended. They ate outside on the porch, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun. Elara felt a profound sense of belonging, a feeling she hadn't realized she was missing until she found it here, with Liam. As the afternoon wore on, Liam went to work on the garden shed, his movements efficient and skilled. Elara watched him for a while, fascinated by the way he handled tools, the careful precision of his work. She then found a comfortable chair on the porch and continued sketching, capturing the cottage, the garden, and even a few quick studies of Liam at work. The afternoon air was filled with the gentle sounds of hammering and the rustle of leaves, a peaceful symphony of domesticity. Later, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Elara joined Liam in the garden. He was carefully pruning a rosebush, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Need a hand?" she offered, though she knew little about gardening. He straightened up, a small smudge of dirt on his cheek. "No, just finishing up here. But thank you. It's been a good day." "It has," Elara agreed, her gaze lingering on his face. "A really good day?" They stood together for a moment, watching the sunset cast long shadows across the garden. The air was cooling, carrying the scent of rich earth and blooming flowers. "What do you usually do for dinner?" Elara asked, realizing she hadn't thought about it. Liam turned to her, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Tonight, how about we cook something together? I have some fresh vegetables and a recipe for a simple pasta dish that's quite good." "I'd love that," Elara said, her heart doing a little flip. Cooking together felt like another step, another layer to their unfolding connection. The kitchen became a lively, warm space as they worked side by side. Liam showed Elara how to chop the garlic and onions with a practiced ease, his hand gently guiding hers when she struggled with a particularly stubborn tomato. Their fingers brushed occasionally, sending small sparks through Elara. They laughed easily, sharing stories and quiet jokes. The aroma of simmering tomatoes and fresh herbs soon filled the cottage, a comforting, inviting smell. As they sat down to eat, the single candle flickering between them cast a soft, intimate glow. The pasta was delicious, rich with the flavors of fresh basil and garlic. "This is wonderful, Liam," Elara said, taking another bite. "You're a wonderful cook." "Just simple, wholesome food," he demurred, though his eyes held a pleased warmth. "It's nice to share it." "It is," she agreed, meeting his gaze. The quiet intimacy of the evening felt profound, a testament to the ease and depth of their burgeoning connection. I haven't felt this comfortable, this truly at peace, in a long time," Elara confessed, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "It's usually just me, in my own little world, with my art, and sometimes it can feel a little lonely." Liam reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. His touch was warm, reassuring. "You don't have to be alone, Elara, not if you don't want to be." His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. Tears pricked at Elara's eyes, a surprising welling of emotion. His quiet understanding, his gentle acceptance, was everything she had yearned for without even realizing it. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick. "For being you." He smiled, a gentle, understanding smile that reached his eyes. "And thank you, Elara, for being here, for bringing your light to this quiet corner of the world." They lingered at the table, talking quietly, sharing more pieces of their lives, their pasts, their hopes for the future. Elara spoke of her nomadic past, moving from city to city, always searching for a place to truly belong. Liam shared stories of growing up in a small town, of his love for the slower pace of life, and how he had found his true calling in the quiet artistry of woodworking. "I suppose," Elara mused, "I've always been a bit of a wanderer, never quite settling down." Liam squeezed her hand again. "There's beauty in that too, Elara, in seeing the world, experiencing new things. But sometimes, even wanderers need a home base, a place to return to." His gaze was tender, full of unspoken meaning. As the evening deepened, they moved to the living room, the fire in the hearth casting a warm, flickering glow. Liam put on some soft instrumental music, and they settled onto the sofa, a comfortable silence falling between them. Elara found herself leaning into his side, feeling the familiar warmth and solidness of him. He wrapped an arm around her, and she rested her head on his shoulder, utterly content. The quiet melody of the music filled the room, weaving itself into the fabric of their shared moment. Elara closed her eyes, breathing in Liam's scent, a subtle mix of wood smoke, fresh air, and something uniquely his. She felt safe, cherished, and deeply, profoundly happy. This quiet cottage, nestled amongst the trees, had become a haven, and Liam, with his gentle strength and profound kindness, was quickly becoming the anchor she hadn't known she needed. The next few days unfolded with a similar rhythm of quiet joy and deepening connection. Mornings began with coffee and shared breakfasts, followed by long walks through the woods or along the river. Elara spent hours sketching, her inspiration flowing freely in Liam's comforting presence. He, in turn, worked on his woodworking projects, the soft rasp of sandpaper or the rhythmic tap of a hammer becoming a soothing backdrop to her artistic endeavors. They discovered a shared love for old books, spending one rainy afternoon curled up on the sofa, each lost in their own story, but with a comforting awareness of the other's presence. Liam would occasionally read a particularly striking passage aloud, his deep voice lending gravitas to the words, and Elara would respond with a thoughtful comment or a quiet smile. One afternoon, Elara decided to tackle a portrait of Liam. He was initially hesitant, a shy blush coloring his cheeks. "May, are you sure?" he'd asked, a hint of self-consciousness in his voice. "Yes," Elara insisted, her eyes sparkling with determination. "I want to capture that quiet strength, that thoughtful gaze." He eventually relented, settling into a comfortable chair by the window, a book open on his lap, though his eyes often drifted to Elara, a soft smile playing on his lips. Elara worked with a focused intensity, trying to capture the subtle nuances of his expression, the lines of kindness around his eyes, the gentle curve of his mouth. It was a challenging but rewarding process, allowing her to truly study him, to see him with an artist's eye and a deepening affection. Later, when she finally showed him the finished sketch, a charcoal portrait that captured his essence perfectly, he was genuinely moved. "Elara," he breathed, his voice a little hoarse. It's incredible. You've truly captured something." His reaction filled her with a warmth that surpassed any professional praise she had ever received. "You make for a very inspiring subject," she whispered, her gaze lingering on his face, then back to the drawing. Their meals continued to be a shared affair, simple but delicious. They experimented with new recipes, laughing at minor mishaps and celebrating small culinary triumphs. Elara found herself rediscovering the joy of domesticity, a feeling she had long dismissed as incompatible with her artistic, free-spirited nature. But with Liam, it felt different. It felt like an extension of their shared lives, a gentle weaving together of their individual threads. One evening, as they were clearing up after dinner, Elara found herself feeling a pang of wistfulness. Her time at the cottage was drawing to a close. She had initially planned for a week, and it was almost over. The thought of leaving, of returning to her solitary life, felt surprisingly heavy. Liam seemed to sense her mood. He stopped wiping down the counter, turning to face her. "Is everything all right, Elara?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Yes, mostly. It's just, I've been so happy here, Liam. More than I expected. And I realize my time is almost up." His eyes softened, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I know. Time seems to move differently when you're enjoying yourself." He paused, then took a step closer, his gaze steady and warm. "You don't have to leave, you know. Not yet, anyway. If you wanted to stay longer, the cottage is yours for as long as you need it." Elara's heart fluttered. The offer was generous, a quiet invitation to prolong this unexpected ideal. "Liam, that's incredibly kind of you, but I couldn't impose." He shook his head gently. "It wouldn't be an imposition, Elara. Not at all. I enjoy your company, more than I can say." He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, reassuring, and filled with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "And I think I'd miss you if you left." His honesty, his quiet vulnerability, touched her deeply. Elara looked into his eyes, seeing the genuine warmth and affection there, mirroring the feelings swirling within her own heart. The thought of leaving him, of leaving this place that had so quickly become a sanctuary, was almost unbearable. "I'd miss you too, Liam," she admitted, her voice soft, barely above a whisper. He squeezed her hand gently. "Then stay. Stay for a while longer. See where the days take us." The invitation hung in the air, a beautiful, unspoken promise. Ilara didn't need to think about it. The answer was already singing in her heart. She smiled, a radiant, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "Okay," she said, her voice filled with a quiet joy. "Okay, I'll stay." Liam's smile deepened, a profound sense of relief and happiness washing over his features. He didn't say anything more, but the warmth in his eyes, the gentle squeeze of his hand, spoke volumes. It was an unspoken agreement, a quiet commitment to explore this beautiful, unfolding connection they had found. That night, as Ilara lay in bed, the sounds of the night filtering through her window felt more comforting than ever. She wasn't just staying in a cottage, she was staying with Liam. With the man who had, in a few short days, shown her a depth of kindness, understanding, and quiet affection that had utterly captivated her heart. The future stretched out before them, an unknown path. But for the first time in a long time, Ilara felt excited, hopeful, and deeply, wonderfully loved. The following days unfolded with a quiet grace, weaving Ilara further into the fabric of Liam's simple, yet profound, life. Mornings began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the gentle clatter of breakfast being prepared in the sun-drenched kitchen. Ilara would sit by the window, sketching ideas for her project while Liam worked on his intricate carvings, the soft rasp of wood against blade a soothing rhythm. They'd take long walks through the woods, Liam pointing out ancient trees and hidden streams, sharing local legends with a twinkle in his eye, while Ilara filled her sketchpad with the vibrant greens and earthy browns of the landscape. Evenings were for shared meals often cooked together, followed by stories or silent contemplation under the vast, star-strewn sky. As weeks turned into a month, Ilara's research project, initially her sole focus, slowly began to shift in her priorities. She was making excellent progress, her sketches and notes brimming with inspiration, but the thought of returning to the bustling city, to her meticulously planned life, now felt distant, like a faint echo from another world. The vibrant energy she once thrived on seemed to pale in comparison to the quiet joy she found here, in the rhythm of the seasons and the steady beat of Liam's heart beside hers. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch, the sun warm on their faces, Liam turned to her, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Your project must be coming along beautifully," he observed, his gaze thoughtful. "Are you close to finishing up?" Ilara felt a familiar pang in her chest. It was a question she'd been carefully avoiding, even in her own mind. She traced the rim of her teacup. "It is," she admitted, her voice softer than she intended. "The data I've gathered here is incredible, more than I could have hoped for." She paused, then looked up, meeting his calm, understanding eyes. "But the thought of leaving, it's harder than I imagined." Liam reached across the small table, gently taking her hand. His touch was warm and reassuring. "I know," he said simply, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "This place has a way of getting under your skin. And you've certainly gotten under mine, Ilara." His confession, quiet and heartfelt, sent a delicious shiver through her. Ilara squeezed his hand, her eyes welling up slightly. "I feel it too, Liam, more than I've ever felt anything. But my life, it's in the city. My work, my apartment, everything." She gestured vaguely. "And yours is here. How do we reconcile that?" The unspoken fear hung in the air. "Was this just a beautiful interlude, destined to end?" "Oh, Dad." Liam's gaze was steady, unwavering. "We figure it out. Together." He paused, then continued. "I've always loved this land, Ilara. It's where my art comes from, where my family has been for generations. But my world isn't so small that it can't make room for you. And if your world truly makes you happy, then I want to understand it, to be a part of it too." He smiled gently. "Perhaps a city needs a little more nature, and nature could use a little more." Ilara's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and profound love. He wasn't asking her to abandon her life, nor was he sacrificing his. He was suggesting they build a bridge together. "What if," she began, a new idea sparking in her mind. What if I don't go back to the city permanently? Not right away, at least. My project allows for remote work, and I could set up a studio here. Or I could find a way to incorporate this environment, this inspiration into my work in a more permanent way. Liam's eyes lit up. A studio here? Alara, that would be wonderful. You could have the old shed by the creek. It gets beautiful light. He squeezed her hand again. And I could come with you to the city sometimes too, see your world. Maybe even sell some carvings there. It was a gradual merging, not an abrupt severing. It felt right, authentic to them. Alara realized that love wasn't about choosing one life over another, but about expanding both to include the person who made them richer. Over the next few months, their shared future began to take shape, organically and joyfully. Alara transformed the old shed into a bright, airy studio, its windows overlooking the very landscape that had inspired her, now filled with her sketches and the scent of fresh paint. Her research, once a solitary pursuit, blossomed with Liam's input, his knowledge of local flora and fauna enriching her understanding in unexpected ways. He, in turn, found new motifs for his carvings in her artistic perspective, and even made a few successful trips to city markets, his rustic, beautiful pieces finding an eager audience. They learned to navigate the gentle ebb and flow of their individual passions and their shared love. Sometimes, Alara would join Liam in his studio, quietly sketching him as he worked, capturing the intense focus in his eyes. Other times he would sit beside her reading, offering observations on her designs, his presence a comforting anchor. One evening, as the first stars began to pepper the twilight sky, they sat on the porch swing, just as they had that day weeks ago. Alara leaned her head against Liam's shoulder, his arm warm around her. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I used to think my life was perfectly mapped out, she murmured, gazing at the silhouette of the trees against the fading light. But it was missing. This. She tightened her grip on his hand. Liam kissed the top of her head. And I used to think I was content with just the quiet of the woods, he replied, his voice a low rumble. But it was missing. Your laughter, your light, your beautiful chaos. The cottage, once a temporary refuge, was now home. Not just a place, but a feeling, woven from shared dreams, quiet understanding, and a love that had bloomed unexpectedly in the heart of the woods. Alara closed her eyes, a profound sense of peace settling over her. The future was no longer an unknown path, but a beautiful, winding trail they would explore hand in hand, under the watchful, loving gaze of the stars. And as sleep gently claimed her, she knew, with an unwavering certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be, wonderfully, truly loved.